The regular season is done, and for sports YouTubers like me, that only means one thing. Well, actually, no, it means two things. One is that we start getting a heap more views because people are interested in the finals. But the other is that you start getting DMs and comments giving you all kinds of crap for predictions that you made in the preseason. So this year I thought I would get ahead of the curve and react to those predictions. I really have no memory of where I predicted the vast majority of teams, so it's going to be as new to me as it is to you. But with a number of teams cataclysmically underachieving this year and a few shooting into the top 8, these could be pretty wrong. Let's get straight into it. In last place, we obviously had the Tigers for the third consecutive year in a row, and I predicted them to finish in 16th. Okay, yeah, that's not too bad. I felt that Benji Marshall coming in as head coach and a couple of pretty good signings would propel them all the way up the ladder by one spot. The big question that I had over the Tigers coming into this year was who was going to play in the halves, and I thought it really was a three-way battle between Aiden Caesar, Jaden Sullivan and Latu Fainu. But I don't think anybody saw Lachlan Galvin coming. To quote Cars,
"You know, I don't think anybody expected this. The rookie sensation came into the season unknown, but everyone knows him now."
And while even his rise wasn't enough to get them off the bottom of the ladder, I do think my prediction that the Tigers would generally go in the right direction has proven to be true. I state all the reasons why in this video. So not bad, only off by one, I'll take that. In 16th was the Rabbitohs, and I had them predicted to finish in, 6th. That really doesn't surprise me, to be honest. I mean, in the preseason they had the signing of Jack Whiten coming in. We didn't know that the likes of Campbell Graham and Tavita Totola would spend so much of the season out injured. I did say as well in my preseason video on the Rabbitohs that them finishing that high on the ladder was contingent on whether Latrell could consistently deliver for them, and for one reason or another that simply didn't happen this year. I felt that the club was going to bounce back from a record-breakingly bad fall down the ladder from first to missing the finals in the space of half a season, but really their descent only continued. They've obviously got Wayne Bennett coming in for next season, so things are looking up for Souths, but really this was a very, very disappointing year for them. In 50th spot was the Eels, and I had them predicted to finish in 11th. That's sort of an okay prediction. I mean, I'm kind of okay with that, even though it was 4 spots off. I think that the injury in the back end of the season to Mitch Moses did cost them a few wins and therefore probably a few ladder positions. One huge question that I had over them coming into this year was which version of their more inconsistent players would we see coming into this year. And unfortunately for Parramatta, it did tend to be the worst version of those players. I was skeptical as well in that preseason prediction video that Brad Arthur was the man to carry the club forward into the future, and clearly the Parramatta board ended up agreeing with me. Again though, much like South Sydney, I do think that things are looking up for the Eels. Dylan Brown has avoided an ACL injury, which means he'll be ready to go by the start of next season, and they compare him with Mitch Moses. And obviously they've got a very highly rated young coach in Jason Riles coming in. Like Souths, they have the squad on paper to be contesting way higher up the table, and we'll see whether they can manage to do that in 2025. In 14th was the Titans, and I had them finishing up in 12th, so again, that's not too bad. I will say though, when I predicted the Titans to finish in 12th, I remember thinking that they would be battling for the finals, and really, with the exception of a very good period where they strung wins together in the back end of the year, they really didn't show that they were capable of doing that consistently. Probably a big part of that though was the fact that their captain Tina Fa'asuamaleaui pretty much played no games this year. At the start of the year I expressed some concern about how their spine would all fit together, and they did seem to land on an answer of Keanu Keeney at fullback, Jaden Campbell at 6, Kieran Foran at 7 and Sam Verrills at 9. But again, I feel like we're going to be coming into the preseason 12 months on and still we're not really going to know how AJ Brimson fits into this team. I do really trust Des Hasler as a coach though, and as I mentioned during that period where they were winning games, I think his ethos had finally got through to the squad. This was definitely a disappointing season for them, but they showed decent little periods, and I reckon with another preseason under his belt, Des may finally get what he wants from this team. In 13th was the Warriors, and I did have them predicted to miss the finals up in 9th. Again, I'm sort of happy with that prediction because you got to remember the Warriors finished in 4th last year. Predicting them to go from 4th to 9th is a pretty significant drop off, and while I didn't predict their fall to be as terrible as it was, I did kind of see it coming. Every year we see one or two teams shoot out from nowhere into the top 8, and then the following season everyone's pretty high on them, and they do tend to struggle to back up the next year. We saw it with the Cowboys the year before, and this year it was the Warriors. Injuries obviously played a massive part for them, and they lost a number of close games to very questionable calls. But when it's not your year, it's not your year, and this really wasn't the year for the New Zealand Warriors. They couldn't nail down a consistent halves pairing due to injuries, and the power of brilliant looking retro jerseys only takes you so far. On paper, definitely a poor year for the Warriors, but I think when you contextualize it by looking at those games, you see that they were just really unlucky this year. Yeah, no, this was the one that I was dreading. The Broncos finished in 12th, and obviously like any other decent NRL content creator out there, I had them finishing in the top 4. I do remember thinking that they would struggle to fill the gaps left by the likes of Herbie Farnworth, Tom Flegler, and Kurt Capewell, but I won't even pretend to claim that I saw anything like this coming. My biggest question mark over them coming to this year was whether they could dust themselves off from that unfortunately miraculous grand final loss in 2023. And really, I think consistently throughout the year, they just showed that they couldn't. At a time when the playing group needed strong leaders to guide it through what was a very tough psychological period, they got rid of Kurt Capewell, and their guys coming through simply weren't capable of stepping up and filling that leadership void. Things were obviously made a lot worse when Adam Reynolds went down injured and spent a massive chunk of the season unavailable. But even after he came back from injury, the Broncos had an absolutely terrible go of it and showed that there are much deeper problems than just their halfback being unavailable. To me, I don't think Kevin Walters is the right man to continue leading this squad. Do I think he'll be sacked before the season starts? No, but at the same time, I do think that he will be pretty soon into the season. Obviously, that really depends on how they start next year, but we've got to remember that it was only 12 months ago that Selwyn Cobbo appeared on a podcast and said that Kevy's a good guy, but not necessarily a good coach. He clearly brings a lot of passion and care for that club, but it seems like that high vibes kind of attitude really only got the best out of them for 1 year. At times this season when the Broncos had everything to play for, they consistently failed to show up, and that is a tremendous concern. In 11th, we had the Dragons, and oh no. Okay, yeah, no, I thought this was coming. The first thing I thought when I saw that I didn't predict the Tigers to finish with a spoon is, okay, who did I predict to finish with a spoon? And it was the Dragons. In my defense, right, hear me out, they were an absolute shambles coming into this year. Tyrell Sloan at fullback was just absolutely shot for confidence. We were right at the height of the Zach Lomax wanting to leave rumours because he didn't want to play on the wing. Their 5'8" from the year before, Talatau Amone, had chased a tradie off a roof while wielding a hammer, and the man that they signed to replace him, Ronald Volkman, did his ACL and was out for the entire year. Ben Hunt was willing to move to the Gold Coast Titans if it meant that he could stop playing for this joint. No, but listen to this. I did say this. I will say this about the Dragons though. Year after year, everyone predicts them to get the spoon and they never do. It was right there, and I still said that they were going to get the spoon. No, but seriously, to me that just speaks volumes as to how good a job Shane Flanagan did this year. I know they kind of choked at the back end of the season and definitely had the opportunity to make the finals if not for a couple of bad losses. But overall, I still call that a positive year for the Dragons, and I think it shows the value of having a strong figurehead in the premiership winning coach leading your club. In 10th place were the Dolphins, and I had them finishing in 13th. So again, not a terrible prediction, but I didn't expect them to be as competitive for as much of the season as they were. They sat in the top 4 a decent chunk of the way into this season, and the way that they were able to unearth players like Isaiah Katoa was very impressive. Especially when you consider that Tom Gilbert didn't play a game this year, Tom Flegler pretty much didn't play a game this year, and for a side that is kind of low on star talent, those are 2 of their stars. Wayne Bennett himself will be disappointed not to have made the finals in either of his years with the Dolphins, given how close they came in both of them. But he's absolutely set up that club very well, and with Christian Wolf coming in as head coach for next year, I am optimistic about their chances that they will make it in 2025. In 9th place was the Raiders, and dear Lord, I predicted them to finish in the bottom 4. I do remember thinking that, to be fair. I mean, Jack Whiten was really their star man, he was gone. I just looked at their 1-17 and thought this isn't strong enough to be competitive again. But it was, and Ricky Stuart again has done a brilliant job of overachieving with this young side. Even more so when you consider that Jamal Fogarty, who was, in my opinion, their key man for sure coming into this year, missed a huge chunk of the season. The experience that they've given to guys like Ethan Strange and Kyle Weeks, and even the likes of Chevy Stewart, who had a decent run of games this year, that'll really pay dividends to them moving into the future. The fact that a side with a halves pairing of Kyle Weeks and Ethan Strange for the vast majority of the season was able to finish in 9th is just remarkable. I was going to say that I won't ever doubt them again, but to be honest, probably coming into next season's predictions, I am once again going to predict that they will finish lower on the ladder. But I see people questioning all the time Ricky Stuart's job at that club, given that he hasn't had a heap of success in the finals. But just getting that club into the finals is success in itself, and I don't think there's anyone else out there who could do a better job than he is. Moving into the finals, we had the Knights, and oh, hell yes, finally! We've got our first one right. We had to go through more than half of the competition to do so, but I will take that. And you know what as well, a lot of people thought that they were going to miss the finals this year, so I'm particularly happy with that one. Granted, it came down to the final game of the year, but ignore the technicalities, that prediction was correct. In their season preview video, I said that I wasn't sure how their spine were going to line up this year, and I think over the course of the entire season, Adam O'Brien showed that he wasn't quite sure either. They chopped and changed their halves so much this year, and even now going into the finals, they've got a halfback who people generally regard as a hooker, and a 5'8" who people generally regard as a halfback. Their brilliant in-form halves when they went on that massive run at the end of last year were Jackson Hastings and Tyson Gamble. If you were to say back then that the Knights would qualify for the finals in 2024, but neither of them would be the starting first grade halves, you would have been pretty hard pressed to find someone who believes you. And while they are sort of a step below the other teams in the top 8, I think they've done pretty well to get there given the circumstances, and it is a positive year for Newcastle. Oh, and back-to-back correct predictions. The Sea Eagles finished 7th, which is exactly where I had them finishing. I remember saying at the time that them finishing in the finals was contingent on Tom Trbojevic being fit to play, and for the most part this season he was. Oh man, the first major talking point I had for the Sea Eagles in that video was, quote, "Is this the year of Josh Schuster?" No, it was not the year of Josh Schuster. Josh Schuster did not play an NRL game, and in fact he was released in April. Manly did find their way without him though, particularly with the emergence of Carl Lawton as a consistent back rower. Daly Cherry Evans once again defied Father Time to guide them to another good finish, and that will remain a talking point for the remainder of his career, whether he can continue to get up again season after season. But to me, as I said in my last video, if you're looking for a dark horse to win this premiership, it's them. What they did this year was pretty impressive, and they've still got a final series ahead of them now. And from back-to-back correct predictions to one that I've got catastrophically wrong, I predicted the Bulldogs to finish down in 14th. I mean, again, this is another one that I think very, very few people, if any, saw coming. This preseason, they obviously signed about 1 million utilities, and the fact is that many of those have found a consistent home in the 17. Connor Tracy has gone from a utility to a premier fullback. Kurt Mann was a super important player for them at lock this season. You pair that with guys like Toby Sexton becoming a very good halfback, and Bronson Xerri being an extremely solid centre after 4 years out of the NRL. Things just really went right for the Bulldogs this season. I mean, the signing of Stephen Crichton proved to be an absolute masterstroke. He is my captain of the year. But Cameron Ciraldo should be commended for doing what he's done in breaking their finals drought. I mentioned earlier in this video that there always seems to be one team that kind of shoots out of the ground, surprises everybody and qualifies in the finals. This year that was absolutely the Bulldogs. Whether they can continue the success from this year into next season is going to be a talking point for them. In 5th place was the Cowboys, and yeah, no, I had a little bit of a stinker with this one, to be honest. I thought they'd finish 10th. They had finished 11th in the season before, so I did think that they would improve technically, but I was concerned about the likes of Chad Townsend being the man to lead this club around. Obviously they found a lot more consistency since bringing Jake Clifford in at halfback, but they hadn't really made any significant signings. I mean, they brought in Viliami Vailia and Tom McHaley, who have proven to be part of the 17, but they're not exactly game changers. I tend to be not as high on the Cowboys as a lot of other NRL content creators are, but they proved me wrong this season. I'm absolutely happy to wear that, and just like the Seagulls, if you're looking for a dark horse this year, their record against the top 8 is better than anyone, and that is very hard to ignore. In 4th place was the Sharks, and I had them in 5th, so again, there's another one that I'm pretty happy about. Heading into this season, there was a prevailing opinion that the Sharks forward pack was just underperforming, and considering that Dale Finucane retired not long into the season, they've done a pretty good job to get into the top 4 this year. I think one big thing that's contributed to that is, funnily enough, the emergence of Kyle Iro, which has allowed Sifa Talagai to shift into the forwards and really give them a lot of momentum coming off the bench. Braden Trindle and Nico Hines at times do still struggle to find the balance between each other, but they do seem to have got it a bit better heading into this final series. Craig Fitzgibbon has done a very good job as head coach there for the 3rd season in a row, and next year I will 100% predict that they're going to make the finals again. In 3rd place was the Roosters, and we're spot on again. That one I do remember. They had had 2 very poor seasons where they just barely scraped into the finals. And so while on paper I was confident that they were a good team, I was not prepared to say that they were going to be consistent enough to make the top 2. It's kind of hard to talk about them because they did well this season to make the top 4 when you put it in the context of the 2 seasons that came before that. But on a fundamental level, top 4 is just where this team should be anyway. So yeah, I mean, 3rd place is decent for the Roosters. It's appropriate that it's exactly where I predicted them to finish. That's bang on where I would expect them to be. I remember saying in the lead up to this season that this was going to be the end of a premiership window for the Roosters, and that was even before we knew that Joseph Manu was going to leave the club or Luke Keary was going to retire. But this whole year, it's kind of had that last dance feel to it. And whilst they head into the finals very much against the odds in terms of having had their injuries, they are still a decent chance of taking out this premiership. And the top 2, it's as simple as I got the top 2 right, but I got the order wrong. The Panthers, who finished in 2nd, I had finishing in 1st, and the Storm, who finished in 1st, I had finishing in 2nd. Penrith did struggle a lot more than I thought they would this season. Obviously, they've battled with injuries to Nathan Cleary and Dylan Edwards being selected in State of Origin. But there were multiple points this season where the side that did look for the last 3 years absolutely immortal, absolutely unbeatable, was shown that it can be beat. I do feel a bit stupid in being so negative about them when they fell all the way from a predicted 1st to 2nd place. But to some, them winning the minor premiership coming into the season was almost a foregone conclusion. So for them to be several wins off the Storm come the back end of the year is a little bit of a disappointment for them. That's me being super critical, but you know, when they're a side that has standards that are that high, they're going to be subjected to higher standards of criticism. I'm pretty happy that I predicted the Storm to finish in the top 2 because heading into this year, they were definitely on paper in a worse spot than the Roosters and the Broncos. But you've just got to back Craig Bellamy. I mean, every single season, he gets the job done for the Storm. His coaching record is just remarkable, and if he manages to win a premiership after the retirements of the likes of Cooper Cronk, Billy Slater, and Cameron Smith, that is just another feather in his cap. As long as that man is head coach of the Storm, I am never doubting that they'll make the top 4. So anyway, to round things off, I have tallied up the number of positions in total that I was wrong by. So for example, I predicted the Rabbitohs to finish in 6th, they finished in 16th, and so I was wrong by 10 positions. Therefore 10 points. What I'm going to do in future is compare how much I was wrong by this year to my scores in future years, and we'll see whether I improve over time. This year I was wrong by a total of 60 positions, which does seem like a lot, but I'm kind of okay with, especially given it's a salary cap competition and there were so many sides like the Bulldogs, Rabbitohs and Broncos who finished way outside where we thought they would. There were a couple that I got bang on and a few where I was only off by 1 or 2 positions, so I'm okay with that, I'll take it, but obviously we'll be looking to improve in the future. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.